Hi, my name is Jordan Hillerud.
And I'm Morgan Heidecker.
We're going to talk to you about the experiences and prospects of genetically engineered crops. Morgan's going to tell you about the background summary right now of our article.
In 2015, 15% of all cropland worldwide was genetically engineered and planted. Almost all genetically engineered crops planted worldwide are corn, soybeans, cotton, or canola, which are engineered to tolerate specific herbicides or resist certain insect species. Other cultivated crops have been engineered for virus resistance and other traits, namely papaya, beans, squash, potatoes, and apples. In simple terms, it's a seed that's bred to withstand the application of a chemical, so the weeds around it are killed, but it lives on, and it's resistant to the chemical where the weeds are not. This technology has changed the entire agriculture industry and has benefited farmers all over the world. However, over time, weeds have begun to build resistance to these chemicals.
In the case where glyphosate is used extensively, weeds susceptible to the herbicide have been replaced by those less susceptible to the herbicide, thus requiring higher herbicide application rates and/or an increase in the number of applications of herbicide. Because of this, there's a large push for researchers and farmers to better manage their herbicide use.
However, lately some consumers of agricultural products have their knowledge of genetically engineered products made up of fear and confusion as to what genetically engineered actually means, and how it affects what they buy and eat. Because of this uncertainty, there have been huge increases in tests and research done on the effects of genetically engineered crops.
The experiences and prospects of genetically engineered crops, as this article is titled, is definitely an important topic for discussion and debate, but research and awareness is equally important. An increasing amount of consumers base their knowledge of genetically engineered crops and genetically modified organisms on fear, a fear that is fed by false advertising, unscientific research, and false information.
The National Academies of Sciences reported their research results related to cancer, obesity, gastrointestinal tract illnesses, kidney disease, and allergies, taken from the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Western Europe. There was no difference in the levels of these illnesses after the introduction of genetically engineered crops throughout the 1990s. In addition to consumers' fear of purchasing and eating food that may have come from genetically modified plants or plants that were subject to pesticides or herbicides, there is a general health concern about the chemicals used.
So the previous stat discussed by the NAS was that genetically engineered crops had no effect on a number of illnesses. The NAS community studied differences in crops and a historical trend from the United States and other countries for cotton, maize, soybeans. And there's no evidence suggesting that the average rate of yield growth was due to genetically engineered crops. This stat may be hard for some farmers and producers to believe, but the NAS goes on to discuss factors that contribute to the average yield increase in crops more than genetically engineered crops adoption.
Some of these other, more important factors are better crop and resource management practices on the farm, changes in the use efficiency of inputs such as fertilizers and agrochemicals, access to infrastructure such as roads and irrigation, and changes in the incentives provided by market signals and public policy.
Underlying economics. Although there will be a higher seed cost for the farmers, their revenue will greatly increase because of greater yields, lower input use, and reduction in crop damage. Lower production costs affect not only the farmer, but also the consumer. Now because of this, genetically engineered products will be cheaper for the consumer compared to buying organic products. As more genetically engineered crops are introduced and internationally traded, in many cases with multiple trade combinations, the expectation is that trade disruptions related to genetically engineered crops will increase. If this situation is not resolved through international cooperation, this may become a very expensive development, with implications of significant cost increases for exporting and importing countries. That was a quote from Falk Zepeda. Increased demand for labels, food chain illustrations, guarantees, etc. Increases variety and price of agricultural products instead of fear of GMO and genetically engineered crops leads to a decrease in demand. GMO
Labels like these have a dramatic effect on the economics and production of agricultural products. More consumers are demanding food that is not only non-GMO, but also food that they can trace. products that are well labeled, that gives the consumer a better understanding of the food chain and where that product came from, and how the animal was raised even, are in high demand. Also, to be ensured, the natural, ethical, religious, and philosophical dimensions of food are known. These consumer demands are forcing agricultural products to be available in more variety, but also much more expensive and difficult to implement.
Market limitations. A limiting factor in the genetically engineered crop development process is the limitations in the international market. An example of this is with the European trade restrictions with genetically engineered crops. A new flax variety developed in 2009 was rejected by the European Union, who Canada used to have as their main export destination. This kind of mistake lost a main trading partner and millions of dollars from the research and development putting in to make an Astrifid seed. The resulting effects of this mistake lasted for several years, as Canadian farmers had a bunch of genetically engineered seed that was literally worthless. Advantages and disadvantages of genetically engineered crops. The new big technological development for grain producers everywhere is genetically engineered crops. An example of this is an insect-resistant trait called Bt that are toxic to specific crop-damaging insects. The main concern with genetically engineered crops with these kind of traits is environmental safety. In fact, instead of harming the environment, it actually benefits it. It does this by reducing the amount of pesticides needed by farmers to control these pests. For farmers who did not adopt this new type of genetically engineered crop, they are also benefiting as there is an overall reduction in the local pest populations. However, as time goes on, the risk of Bt resistance greatens.
Not only insect-resistant traits can be passed on to genetically engineered crops, but also herbicide-tolerant traits. This will allow farmers to spray specific herbicides such as glyphosate to control the weeds without damaging the crop. This benefits the environment as glyphosate has a lower toxicity than the herbicides used before. The same risks can occur such as the Bt insect-resistant varieties. Over time, there is a greater risk of weed resistance to the glyphosate. As a result, farmers will increase herbicide use. In order to solve these issues, there needs to be a better herbicide management strategy to help delay the emergence of herbicide resistance, which allows the technology's life cycle to greatly increase. Instead of a herbicide only lasting 10 years before resistance develops, the herbicide could last 90.
Safety concerns. With any new technology, there is always the concern of safety. The testing methods for safety include animal testing, nutritional composition analysis, and allergenicity assessments. After these testing procedures, findings confirm that there is no reasonable evidence of harm to the animals. For nutritional composition, there are significant differences between genetically engineered crops and conventional counterparts. These findings are insignificant as variation naturally occurs within each crop. Another concern about genetically engineered crops included health issues such as cancer, obesity, gastrointestinal tract illnesses, kidney disease, and allergenicity. Studies found no pattern of difference since the introduction of genetically engineered crops during the 1990s. All the research concludes that genetically engineered crops are not only highly efficient, but are also safe.
The producers in the ag industry are greatly benefiting from the use of genetically engineered crop technology. Ways that they are benefiting includes yield increases, improved crop protection against pests and diseases, greater crop tolerance to abiotic stresses like drought and extreme temperatures, improved efficiency from photosynthesis, reduced farm costs, increased farm profit, and improvement in health and the environment.
Not only does genetically engineered crops affect the farmers in the ag industry, but also the people who produce genetically engineered seeds needed to supply to the farmers. Companies such as Bayer and Monsanto supply numerous amounts of jobs. Genetically engineered crops are the new technology that allows farmers everywhere to produce crops at the highest efficiency possible.
So, in conclusion, genetically engineered crops benefit everyone, including both producers and consumers. Although there are myths that genetically engineered crops are harmful and dangerous, they can be proved wrong with scientific evidence. Consumers need to be aware of the truth and science of genetically engineered crops.
Genetically engineered crops allow farmers to produce their crops at the highest efficiency. Although there are many other factors that affect yield, grain quality, and international marketing, they all vary year by year. Crop quality is still dependent on the weather, genetically engineered or not. Consumers need to decide whether they are yay or nay for GMOs. After reading the facts, do you understand the importance of genetically engineered crops? In conclusion, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Morgan.
Genetically engineered crops are one major way to provide food to the increasing population.